Understand the IMF, it's really important to understand the balance of payments. And the reason for this is this, and by the way, this is extremely relevant to international managers. You're going to see why all of this is relevant and applicable in a moment. But the reason that this is so important is because this is what the International Monetary Fund itself looks at when it's trying to get ready to help a country in a crisis, when it's standing ready and waiting to assist, because this is really what will determine whether this country is going to have a massive financial crisis. And so the balance of payments is just this. All it is, it measures the flows of money in and out of a country's economy. And this is extremely relevant to international managers because that has an impact. The flow of money in and out of a country's economy has an impact on that country's exchange rate, right? And that clearly is relevant to international managers because if you're trying to export a product, let's say, to Mexico from the United States, and Mexico suddenly has a currency devaluation, now your product is going to be more expensive, right? Your product priced in US dollars that you're trying to export to Mexico is going to be more expensive to people holding Mexican pesos. They're going to require more Mexican pesos to buy your product. It could make it twice as expensive. And so this personally has happened to me in my own experience. We'll get into some of that later. But I think that that is why this is crucial. So this will help you decide or help you predict whether a country is going to have a massive devaluation like this, because it's all based on these underlying factors, right? So that's what the balance of payments is measuring. It's measuring the flow of money in and out of a country's economy, and that flow of money in and out has an impact on the exchange rate. So that's why the IMF, which historically was interested in helping countries maintain fixed exchange rates, now, which is interested in maintaining stable exchange rates, that's why the IMF is so interested in this, right? And monitors this and keeps records of this. And you can find any countries where it stands in the balance of payments at any moment by looking at the imf.org. So what are these two different kinds of flows? So you see that on the one hand, we have the current account, and that's the flow of money in and out of a country's economy that results from trade. So specifically, if we want to be more precise, it's the trade in goods and services plus remittances, okay? And so that's what the current account is. So if we want to be very precise, we wouldn't just speak about a country's trade deficit or trade surplus. We would talk about a country's current account balance, whether it has a surplus or it's in balance or if it's in deficit. And because it's not just the trade in goods and services, it also includes remittances. So let's talk about what all this is. So remittances is just money that is sent in and out of a country's economy. So it could be that a U.S. company sets up a subsidiary in Mexico, and that subsidiary makes some profits, right? And they want to send that money back home to the headquarters office in the United States. Well, that would be money being sent, a remittance being sent from Mexico to the United States. That would count in favor of the U.S. current account balance. That would be more money coming in. That would tend to make our currency stronger, right? On the other hand, if you had a Mexican worker that comes up from Mexico, works in the United States, sends some money back home to his family, that's a remittance, money being sent from the United States into the Mexican economy. That tends to weaken the value of the U.S. currency and makes the Mexican currency stronger. So that's why those are included in the current account balance, right? And so clearly, the bulk of this, though, is the money that results, the flows of money that results from trade. And so that would mean that if a country is exporting a lot and it brings in a lot of export revenues, that would tend to strengthen the value of that country's currency, right? More money coming in, the currency gets stronger. On the other hand, if a country is importing a lot and most of the money, instead of coming in, more money is going out, there's a current account deficit, well, then we would say that country's currency is going to tend to get weaker, right? And so that's why this is very relevant. Now, what we have noticed, and I have ways of, we have some ways we can talk about how to measure this or gauge whether a country is in a trouble, is we can talk about the size of the country's current account deficit. Now, what is interesting to notice about this is it's okay for a country to have a current account deficit. Its currency, that would tend to make the currency weaker. But a country that has a current account deficit normally has, at the same time, a capital account surplus. And countries do this on purpose, right? They create a capital account surplus. So let's talk about the capital account. So the capital account measures the flow of money that results from investment flows in and out of a country's economy. So again, this is the same kind of principle. If more money is flowing in than flowing out, that country's currency will tend to get stronger. If more money is flowing out than flowing in, the currency will get weaker. So do you see that if a country has a current account deficit, a lot of money flowing out to pay for imports, it can balance out the outflow of money on the current account side with an inflow of money on the capital account side, and its balance of payments will remain in equilibrium, and its currency, its exchange rate will remain stable, okay? And so that's basically how this works. And so it makes sense because, so imagine that I want to go to Mexico to buy some things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my US dollars, right? So I can buy things in Mexico. I take my US dollars. I'll go to Mexico, I'll take my US dollars, and I'll exchange them for Mexican pesos, all right? And so when I do that, I am buying Mexican pesos, right? I am putting increased demand on the Mexican peso with my purchase of Mexican pesos. Not by very much, but you can see it's increased demand on the Mexican peso. Well, that would tend to increase the value of the Mexican peso. Increased demand on something tends to increase its price, right? It lowers it, increase its value. So imagine if I were an investor, right, that wanted to go buy some land or a factory or stocks and bonds in Mexico. Well, then I might take hundreds of millions of US dollars and I would exchange them into pesos. I mean, now we're talking about a significant transaction. So that kind of transaction multiplied by many investors doing something like that, that would tend to put increased demand on the Mexican peso, significant increased demand, which would significantly raise the value of the peso. But it can work the other way, right? Let's say I'm an investor that holds lots of Mexican government bonds, and I decide to sell those government bonds. When I sell those government bonds, I get lots of Mexican pesos. I'm going to exchange those Mexican pesos. I'm going to sell them on the currency markets and buy US dollars and take my money back home. Well, when I do that, I'm releasing lots of Mexican pesos onto the Mexican currency market. Oh my gosh, that's going to increase the supply of Mexican pesos. That tends to lower the value of the currency. So when money leaves the country, right, foreign investors sell assets in a country and take their money home, the currency of that country tends to get weaker. You see? So that's why the investment flows in and out have an impact on the exchange rate. The same way that the flows of money resulting from trade plus remittances also have an impact on the value of the country's currency. Now, so as I was saying, it's okay to have a current account deficit, a deficit on the current account side, as long as you have a correspondingly large surplus on the capital account side. That'll keep your balance of payments in equilibrium. That'll keep your exchange rate stable. And if you're doing business in a country and you say, wow, they have a big current account deficit, but, they have a very large capital account surplus, so I would anticipate their exchange rate will remain stable. This is what the IMF watches, right? Now, here's the thing. There are certain circumstances under which a country may find itself with a current account deficit, which is being balanced out by a large capital account surplus, but for whatever reason, investors decide to take all their money out in a hurry. And that could result in no longer having a capital account surplus to balance out the current account deficit. And then we say that that country is experiencing a balance of payments crisis. And a country in that kind of crisis can turn to, who wants to lend money to a country in a crisis? Where are they going to get money? Well, they go to what we call the lender of last resort. the International Monetary Fund. And the International Monetary Fund will give money to that country in the short term to help it get over this crisis, right? But there are times when we have seen countries that are in this kind of situation that it happens very fast. The country has a big current account deficit. Investors, for whatever reason, maybe there's a political crisis, maybe there's something else that scares them, they pull their money out. The country has a balance of payments crisis. The IMF doesn't get there in time, or it doesn't provide enough assistance. There can be a massive currency devaluation. And so we have seen this happen. This has happened many times. We've seen it. It is a common occurrence. And so this is something that I am going to give you the tools to predict this, right? Because what if you're in a country where this happens, or you're trying to export your products to a country, suddenly there's a massive currency devaluation. It's going to be much more difficult for you to sell your products. Do you see this? Or what if you're in a country and suddenly there's this massive crisis and there's a massive devaluation? Well, there could actually be opportunities, right? Because now your US dollars will go further. Maybe this is a good chance for you to go in and buy assets there in the country. So it's important to know how this works and to predict these things. So that's one of the things we're doing in this course. We're trying to give you the tools to predict trends and developments in the global economy and specific countries' economies, right?